So today is the 5-month review of the Canon R5, specifically for video purposes. I just felt like I've had the R5 for a long enough time to really share my second follow-up review, which might mean a lot more than the original review simply because I've had the camera for a long time. If you want to see my original review, you should check out the link above. I'll leave it right there. And without further ado, let's talk about the R5 and using it for video purposes after 5 months. So to start you off, 5 months doesn't allow a lot of time to do different events when we're in the current situation that we're all dealing with right now. But whenever I had an event to do, or for this channel, the R5 was my go-to. Now the first question I had to answer for myself after I got my second R5, because the first R5 was one that was sent to me by Canon and I tested out, had to bring back. But my second R5 is the one that I'm recording with now. And after I got that, one of the big decisions that I had to make was what was going to be my predominant and mostly used resolution for the camera. Now we want to all go as high as possible. Shoot that 8K and get that really crisp footage, or 4K HQ. But I had to see what worked for me in my different situations when it comes to shooting for clients, shooting for YouTube videos, shooting for documentary stuff that I'm working on. I had to have a preferred option for each. So the kind of go-to that I wanted to use, because I thought it would be the most data efficient and the best to use overall, would be 4K HQ. So I started off with 4K HQ, and the footage looked amazing right out of camera. 4K HQ was just unbelievable when it comes to YouTube videos that I would upload, and then for a few clients as well, then I would record 4K HQ. And this is minus overheating, because overheating, again, I'll touch on it a little bit later, but overheating has not really been an issue. So 4K HQ, I used it. I wasn't using log at first because when I would try to color correct the log, I wasn't really keen on how the log footage really looked out of the camera, and then when I would apply the Canon LUTs, it still didn't look right to me until I changed the setting in Canon log to shoot neutral rather than Canon's new colors on Canon log. And when I was shooting neutral on Canon log, then I was able to get what I wanted. So almost always I was deferring, especially when filming outside, I was deferring right back to Canon log and enjoying shooting that way. However, when shooting 4K HQ, I was noting that, especially after extensive color correcting and color grading, that my computer was slowing down a lot. And because it was the H.265 codec, 10-bit 422, it struggled even more. So I would create proxies, and I realized this workflow is difficult and it's slowing my computer down. But then I decided to practice a little bit more with 8K RAW, because I bought a 1TB CF Express card, and it was a Delkin, and it worked great. And that 1TB could record almost an hour's worth of 8K RAW, so I was pretty happy with that. When I started working with the 8K RAW in post, I found not only do you get to adjust white balance in post and exposure settings, but it was also editing smoothly, even smoother than the H.265 4K HQ files in log mode. So it was like, why am I shooting log when I could shoot 8K RAW, edit smoothly, have the ability to adjust those settings in post, and I could use Canon Log 2 and Canon Log 3 with the RAW files, which provides me just a bit more dynamic range. So I was basically, and I'm already using the full capabilities of the camera. So that was exciting. So 8K RAW became my go-to, but the amount of footage that I would have to transfer to my hard drives would be massive. So this is how I edit 8K RAW. And I don't recommend that you do this, especially for professional shoots, but for these YouTube videos where I don't mind reshooting it a couple of times if necessary. What I do is I have a CF Express card reader, and I actually pop the CF Express card reader in the computer. From my local SSD then, I would create a new Premiere file and then just import the video footage directly from the CF Express card. Because the CF Express card is so fast, I'm able to edit smoothly using the CF Express card and never transfer the files over to my computer. I don't recommend this because there's a chance, like what if something goes bad and you mess up the file, then you can't recover it. But while doing these YouTube videos, I can really turn around a project a lot faster recording 8K RAW than I would be able to with 4K HQ. So there you go, editing almost instantly. Again, I don't recommend that for a pro shoot. After that, I did filming with slow motion, 4K 120 frames per second and 60 frames per second. And I found, of course, what's commonly known is that if you actually use crop mode and 4K 60 frames per second, you get higher quality 4K in that crop mode than you would if you did the full frame. So that was a nice bonus when I needed not only that extra reach, but that slow motion footage, which works great. But the 4K 120 frames per second looks phenomenal anyway. Yeah, it's not as good as the Sony a7S III from what I hear, because I haven't tested the Sony a7S III, but it still looks incredible, and it's incredible to use. But I've never overheat the camera in those settings, because when recording slow motion, I'm not recording more than a couple minutes at a time, and that's it. So for all these months, slow motion has never been an overheating issue, and the footage comes out amazing every time. My only regret is I wish I could get some raw recording functionality in those modes as well. But other than that, this is amazing. So I talked about 8K and recording for my YouTube videos and for stuff that I do personally. But for external shoots, I also don't suffer any circumstances or problems because I know the camera's benefits and I know the camera's limitations. I uploaded a video not too long ago where I used it for a video shoot, and I had a pleasure working and filming a mini concert with the R5. The R5's ability to record great footage with a nice dynamic range and have great colors and autofocus working and everything just working that I need is incredible. And the fact that I can get raw footage for a lot of it, but then still have ability to record full frame 4K or cropped 4K in downsampled from 5K, which is really high quality, it was incredible. And one thing I didn't mention in that other video, but I mention it now, I used the camera for that whole time. By the end of my shoot, I was able to recover 8K raw recording ability and slow motion ability if I wanted. And I recorded the latter half in 8K after recording the whole time in standard 4K or cropped 4K, which to me, those are just different modes that you can use. But quite frankly, the R5 is the first mirrorless camera that uses a full frame to record 4K, and it included higher frame rates and dual pixel autofocus with eye detect. It gave us everything. So now we're complaining because they promised too much. I'm not complaining, at least not yet. I know how to work with the camera. And again, overheating has not been an issue for me. So let's talk about the overheating, which I've mentioned. Overheating itself has not been an issue because I've been able to record what I need and then go from there. And of course, I know how to work with the camera. But that other time that I was recording that concert, I knew where my limitations were. But for most shoots, overheating just doesn't come up. Whether it was me filming little skits or me filming YouTube videos or me filming a documentary, I just choose the mode I want and I go. And it hasn't overheated and it hasn't been a problem. There was even one time where I actually overheated the camera on purpose and put it in a freezer to see how quick I can bring it back. And within a few minutes, I had full recording capability. Sure, I don't recommend putting it in the freezer at all, but if you're in a scenario where you can actually do something to cool off the camera, it works too. But I had to purposely drive it to there, so no issues after 5 months of filming. So why would I use and film this camera when there were so many other options? And why do I choose this camera over the tons of other cameras that I have here, such as the GH5, Samsung NX1, and other Canon cameras like the 5D Mark IV and the 6D? Well, the capabilities of the R5 outweigh and outsurpass all the other cameras that I have. The flip screen, the dual pixel autofocus, ability to record 8K RAW, ability to record 4K 120 frames per second, the excellent colors, all of that in this small camera body is why I choose it. And then the in-body image stabilization makes it that much better. It just kind of does it all in a camera. And that's really what I wanted. So why not the A7S III or the A1? And I'm going to break it down to be very simple. When I film, I like to have options in post. The A7S III and the A1 can record ProRes RAW externally, but not internally. And because I prefer internal RAW recording, and that's just my preference, in a small body because it makes it easier to manage and handle, that would be why I choose Canon R5, where the A7S III and the A1 do not offer that internally. The other thing is that the features that I get off of the R5 pretty much are included, if not surpassed, when compared to A7S III and the A1, barring the overheating. If you don't think about overheating, I get everything with the R5 and even more than those two cameras. The 4K higher frame rates look better in the A7S III when it comes to detail. But I will tell you, based off of experience, that amount of detail is not something that really makes or changes your work or your footage. It's what you do with it that matters. And if you apply sharpening to the lower quality 4K, it looks almost as good, if not just as good as that 4K HQ. It's an extra step, but it's an option if you want it. Whereas with the A7S III, the option to record 8K doesn't exist. The A1, 8K does exist, but 10-bit 420, not 422, or external RAW, but then external RAW, you won't get a 8K. So that's the trade-off. And I want that ability. So what about the R5C? R5C is coming up. R5C takes away that overheating, and I thought about it. I would think that it's going to be over $6,000, and that's just my assumption, if not higher. But the R5 is expected to be able to do everything that the R5C can do, but the R5C will have no overheating. It's tempting, and it's mostly based as a video camera. Again, it hasn't officially been announced, but we'll see. It may be tempting, and I am keeping my eyes on it. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, have any of the limitations, quote unquote, really been an issue for me? Quite honestly, no. So to spend another $2,000 above my price tag for the R5, they're going to really have to come up with something clever. And it can't just be ND filters, because ND filters are not worth $2,000 in my opinion. At that point, I'll keep my $2,000 and just screw in an ND filter in front of the lens. Let's talk about finally the flaws, because all of this is great. Flaws: no dual slot recording, really inefficient codec, and of course the high bit rate and overheating. All of these are problems, but I never dual slot record even though I have the GH5, because I usually do multiple camera situations when I need to record and have backups, so that hasn't been an issue. The codecs, I told you the workaround, the raw workflow, and the high bit rate and overheating haven't been a problem for me. In fact, I recorded all of this whole section in RAW. So my overall verdict is that the R5 has been the camera that I wanted and even more. And yes, we do have a firmware update that's going to add C-Log 2 to regular recording, as well as more efficient Cinema Raw Lite so that we can record RAW and not take up so much CF Express card slot space. That's great, and that's coming, but for what the camera is today, it is, so far, a great and perfect camera. That's all I got to say. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And as always, like, share. You can make my day if you subscribe today. Magnus, and I'm out. Ooh, I'm getting hot, but yet the camera's still going. I've been recording for like 28 minutes. Go Canon. See you guys later.